Hi, in this video I will talk about accounting sequence, reporting sequence in GL, AB sequence, AR sequence, and fixed asset number. So let's start. First of all, during you implement the ledger, in specify ledger options, there is one sequencing area. Counting and the document sequencing either by ledger, it's well by ledger, by legal entity. If document sequence is enabled at legal entity level in specify ledger option here, due to requirement to sequence AR transaction type by legal entity level, because as you know, transaction number in AR is generated by legal entity level. Sequencing will working fine for AR transaction because a legal entity. But for example, in case of while creating manual journals in GL, we have mandatory field to choose the legal entity. Due to that, you cannot or we are not able to choose primary balancing segments for different legal entity. For example, to create IC journals in GL, so in this case you have to create the journals with different legal entity primary balancing segments through intercompany. Once your intercompany journal will be created in GL, it will generate within one journal patch and the multiple journal headers based on legal entity used in intercompany patch. If you select a new sequence, so you will not allow the system to generate any sequence. Once you select legal entity or ledger, system will ask you at which subledger. We have two subledgers, payables and receivables. So just let's go to setup and maintenance, select financial and manage accounting and reporting sequence. First of all, what is accounting sequence? Accounting sequence are assigned to GL journals when they are posted and to Subledger journals once they complete accounting. This is the accounting sequence. In accounting sequence you have two levels. In GL we have journals, so this sequence will be assigned in GL journals once you post the GL journal. So in this case, and I think all of us facing this issue now I am a user, as a GL user, I create GL journal. When I try to save it and submit it for approval, I didn't find any sequence generated. Why? Because the sequence will generate after posting. Posting means after approved by the supervisor or by the approvals, then the system will post it. After that you will find the sequence of the journals, but in between you cannot find your journals by any sequence number. So in this case you have to search by either journal description, amount, creation date, GL date, currency, blah blah blah. But to find the sequence for this GL, it must, the status of this GL journal must be posted. And also for AB and AR, I think once you save it or validate it or whatever, you can find the or complete accounting, you can find the sequence generated for the Subledger transactions. So first of thing, you have to define sequence. After that, sequence assignment. That I define the sequence, just show you the sequence. What is the name of the sequence? What is the descriptions? What is the name? Effective start date, end date, and initial number. This is the sequence versions. What does it mean? That you can, for each year, you can define a specific sequence. One sequence for 2025, another sequence for 2026, and so on. And also initial number, you can, for example, enter this to 2025 0001. So once you find or notice this sequence, you got it that this related to 2025, and so on. For the version here that allows to create mutation of the same sequence definition. Let's take an example that if the users would want sequence generation to begin from 1 for every financial year, one could simply add two versions. So here you can add version 1, another row for version 2. For version 1 you will start the date for example 1st of January 2020 until December the same year. The version and the initial number will be 1. The version 2 the same, you can name it version 2 or whatever. The start date, for example 2022, for example, the end December in 2022, and the initial number again 1. This setup would ensure that the first journal created for year 2020, which is related to version 1, would begin with 1, and similarly the first journal of the year 2022, which is related to version 2, also will begin with the number 1. This is the name, or this is the benefits of sequence versions. Initial number, it can be any number greater than 0. This number is incremented by 1 for each accounting entry. So here you cannot enter started by 0. You have to start it by 1. The incremented is by 1. For example, if initial number is 1, so the next journal will be 2, 3, 4, and so on. This is the create sequence as the first step, either for AR transaction, AR receipts, AB invoice, AB payment, and GL. Once you create the the sequence, you have to create or make the assignment. Another tab, or the second tab here, again you have to either create or update or whatever. First of all, what is the ledgers? You are going to assign this. Sequence context basically capture information open the event entity combination that will fire sequencing along with other details on sorting and assignment. For example, that sequence entry type. Sequence entry type is the journal transaction for which this particular sequence would get assigned. This could have two values as a general ledger entry and subledger journal entry. For the sequence event is the event which would fire create reporting sequence program to create sequence. For example, if one chooses the sequence event as posting, the sequence will get assigned the moment a journal is posted. A sequencing event can have any of the following values: either GL period close, sequence get created once respective GL period is closed. Posting, sequence get created once the respective journal is posted in GL. And the other one, if I select Subledger, you will find here accounting. Accounting, that sequence get created once transaction is accounted. For example, create accounting program is run. This event can be chosen only for the entity which is Subledger Journal Entry, because create accounting, you cannot run create accounting in GL. GL journals mean approved and posted, but in Subledgers here you have to make it like create accounting to transfer all of these or to affect the GL tables, balances, trial balance, account analysis, and so on. So this is the first, that you have to select the ledger which ledger you are going to make a sequence, and you can also make a combination between journal entry type and sequencing event. For all of these, you can make any different combination based on your requirement. So let's me take any of these, for example, posting, edit. Here he select specific ledger and he select general ledger, sequencing event, posting. Posting means once the journal posted, the sequence will fire or will generate. Sequence validation type is accounting date. Journal sorting date also, we have only one options as a GL or accounting date. Accounting date either in GL journal or AB transaction or AR transaction or procure to pay or whatever. Accounting date means GL date. For require assignment for all journals, if you select these options, you must explicitly define valid sequence assignment or exceptions for all journal entries within a given sequence context. This is very similar to the profile option sequential numbering for traditional document sequencing. Sequence validation date, again, this is the date format for validating the sequences. When generating a sequence number, this date is used to determine if a sequence is available and the sequence assignment is active or not. For journal sorting date, optional, you have to select the sorting option. Assign sequence to sequence assignment, again, once you define all of these options, you have to make association, which is association means this associated to what? What is the sequence you are going to assign to this journal entry type and this sequential event type. This, which we defined in the first step or the previous step. Status is used or not. Start date here must be the same of the start date of this sequence when you define the sequence before in the previous step. End date is end date. Again, accounting sequence get created once a GL journal get posted, and also please note that if more than one journal is posted in the same posting run, the journals are first sorted on the basis of value provided for the parameter assigned sequence by. Assign sequence by and then sequenced accordingly to this. In this setup example for a sequence on journal posting, you have to select sorted basis of accounting date. So if here sorting date, right? So if we post two journals on the same posting program, the sequences would get assigned as follows. Journal with earlier accounting date get sequenced first, followed by others in same order. If one now posts a journal with an accounting date, for example, of January 1, this would get an accounting sequence, for example, of 1 or 2 or 3. This re-emphasizes the fact that only journals in the same posting run are sorted. For the control attributes, you can also assign the sequence for a specific source with a specific category. For example, source manual, spreadsheet, or category. In case of you make importing transaction from third party or integrated system, whatever. Also, you can define the specific source in your journal source and assign specific journal category to this source, and also you can assign this specific sequence to this journal source or category, or as you see here, for all journal source with all journal categories, you will define this. The same type, if you define, for example, Subledger Accounting, again you have to make a combination between Subledger and here you will find the sequencing event Subledger Accounting. This Subledger Accounting is only for Subledger Journal Entry type. Here again, sequence validation and sorting, only accounting date. Just again select the sequence name, start date, journal source and category, and journal event type, journal category. All of this is optional. Either you are going to select specify journal source with a specify journal category, or as you see here, for all journal source with all journal categories for sequencing event. Subledger Accounting and journal entry type is Subledger. Again, also before going move forward for sequence of AB and AR, is there any way to share same accounting or reporting sequence between primary and secondary ledger by legal entity? For example, this business requirement is to have a gapless sequencing in general ledger for the secondary ledger by legal entity. In Fusion, in order to assign sequence to the Subledger secondary ledger, sequencing need to be also enabled on the primary ledgers. Since this is the case, the requirement was then to have the primary ledger and secondary ledger sequencing in synchronized for all transactions, meaning sequence number used in the BL or primary ledgers for transaction A needs to the same sequence number used in the SL, which is secondary ledger, for the equivalent transactions. Today, there is no option to keep in synchronized reporting or accounting currencies between primary and secondary ledger. For this functionality is suggested to create Idea Lab. After that, if we navigate or move forward to sequencing in AB and AR. AB, there are two types of transactions: AR transactions and AR receipts. For AB, there are also two types of transactions: AB payment and AB invoices. How can separate document gapless sequential numbering sequence, or how you make sequential numbering sequence can be set up for AR receipts and AR invoices? First of all, there are three types of document sequence: automatic sequence, manual sequence, gapless sequence. What is the difference? Automatic sequence lets you create audit trail of unique sequential document numbers without data entry. This type is used for processes that create documents automatically: auto invoice, auto logbooks, automatic adjustment, automatic receipts. Manual sequence lets you decide which document numbers you want to assign to transactions at the time of data entry, while always ensuring that your numbers are unique. This type is used for manually entered items: bills, receivables, commitment, credit memos, invoices, invoice adjustment, cash receipts, miscellaneous receipts, debit memo adjustment. The third type is gapless sequences. Gapless is similar to automatic sequencing. It automatically generates a unique number for each document, but does that only for successfully generated documents. Sequence numbers aren't assigned to incomplete or failed documents. As a result, the sequence is maintained for all successfully generated documents. So this is the difference between gapless sequence and automatic sequence. Additionally, you can control gapless document sequencing by enforcing transaction date validation options. When enabled, these options check for the transaction date for a particular document and assign the sequence number accordingly. To chronologically maintain documents, the sequence numbers and transaction dates are chronologically correlated to prevent any mismatch of new document sequence assigned to an older document or an older document sequence assigned to a new document. So you have to plan your document sequence carefully before you start apply sequence numbering. Avoid switching to a different mode after you saved your work on the manage document sequence and the manage document sequence category pages. Again, for this either sequence by no sequence equivalent to profile option value not used. In case of you remember the earlier profile option values, here sequence by no sequence equivalent to profile option value not used. Sequence by legal entity enforce document sequence and evaluated or equivalent to profile option value partially used. Sequencing by ledger legal entity and enforce chronological document sequence, yes, equivalent to profile option value always used. This is the equivalent between current options and previous profile options in e-business. Again, sequence by no sequence, and this means profile option not used. Type sequence by ledger or legal entity and enforce document sequence no, equivalent profile option partially used. Sequence by legal entity or ledger and enforce chronological document sequencing, yes, is equal to profile option always used. Again, we can come back here to the AR. This is for system options of account receivables. As you hear the document number generation, you have the number or the sequence of AR transactions generation at which time. When you saved the AR transactions, when you make a complete for AR transaction or none. None means no sequence. Saved, you create AR transaction, you saved. Once you saved, the system will generate automatically a sequence. Complete, it must be completed. So I think the best option here or the best choice here is when completed. When completed means what? In between you may raise or create approval. So you will ensure that the approval will ensure everything is okay. After that, the system will generate a sequence. Because in this case, once you make it when saved, any sequence will taken, it will not be taken again. Because the sequence means unique number. And also it's very helpful feature that, for example, if you have a lot of customers within the same transaction number, in case of you trying to search by this transaction number, you will find all of these transactions which is related to a different customers, the same in AB. So how to make, or what is the difference between these transactions? It will be the sequence number. So this depends on your requirement, either when saved or when completed. In the transaction section also, document number generation set when completed for gapless. Allow transaction deletion not checked for gapless. Document number generation level for the applicable business units provide the guideline on when the document sequence is generated at the time of either saving or completing the sequence. In the source defaults here that for gapless, copy document to or copy document number to transaction number is checked. This is for gapless. Again, here for allow transaction deletion, don't select this option if you are legally required to number transaction sequentially with no gaps, because again, no gaps means the transaction will create it successfully. Any other transaction either not completed or not successfully, it will not create a gapless for it. And also here copy document number to transaction numbers, these for gapless. Just check these options if you are going to select or choose gapless sequence number for AR transactions. As you see here, again, for the managed document sequence, there are two types for AR and AB and fixed assets or whatever. As you see here, that first of all, what is the document sequence name? That in AR you can define a transaction type, which is invoice type. So you can search by invoice, for example, or transaction type, and you will find all of these transaction type. Just select what is the transaction types, and here's the type which we already told you before, that you have automatic, gapless, manual, and determine type, which is ledgers. The modules is the Subledger modules. You can also assign start date and date, and you can here assign the sequence which you already defined before, or you can select actions and create a new sequence here. The method either also manual, automatic, gapless, and again start date and ledger value. Again, if you select that the application here, it's just for a document sequence to applications, receivables, payables, and so on. Effective date, that make sure you define date that encompasses all transactions you intend to use this. Again, type we already talked about. We recommend that you choose this type only for the gapless when gapless numbering is essential, as it may affect the performance of your system. Determine, which is ledger, and also you can make initial values. This initial values is the starting values of your sequence. The default is 1, but the form will allow entry of any value you select. For manual AR invoices, you need to create also additional manual methods in the document sequence assignment also. Again, for manual AR invoice, you need to create additional manual methods in the document sequence assignment also. For AB, again, you can find the same, that you have to select, for example, invoice, and select the application which is payables, and you will find all of the invoices, either invoice, debit memo, credit memo, and also in case of you selected the payment, you will find the payment here. To assign also sequence to AB payment, AB invoice, and so on. And which type you are prefer, you can assign it. Determine type will be ledger. For fixed assets, there is no sequence, but there is one, or asset numbering. Asset number is a unique. Asset number is in system options, as you see here is a screenshot, that once you implement the fixed asset, the system will ask you what is the generation type of the asset number. Is it either manually, automatically, or both? First of all, what is the start number? You will start by 1, 2, 3, whatever. This checkbox is very important, because what? Once you make the starting, for example, 1, and you checked here prevent user entered asset number, it means generation number of the asset number is automatic. In case of you uncheck this checkbox, it means automatic and manual. For example, I am going to add some of assets, either through FBDI, spreadsheet, or manual direct in user interface. In case of I uncheck box this, and I entered my assets data, and by wrong I entered the asset numbers, the system will consider this asset number as the asset number of these assets. After that, I am going to add a new assets after I added these assets again, but I didn't mention the asset number. The system will continue to use the asset sequence, or will generate asset number based on the asset starting number here in this setup. So you have 3 options: either automatic only, so you have to prevent user enter asset number. The second one is manual and automatic, that uncheck this, so the users he can enter asset number manually, or he will let the system to generate the asset number. But in case of you enable both, the gap list will be happening. For example, I started number here 1, and I take 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. The next time I added a manual assets, and I added or mentioned the asset number manually. For example, 789. So next time when I come to create a new assets, the system will take, for example, a number 10 for the new assets. And also before of that, you can come here to check the last asset number used. You will find like 8 or 9. Why? Because in between the users add some of assets number manually by his hand, so also the system considering these numbers here in last asset number used. I hope now you got overview of the accounting sequence and sequence in AR and in EB. And again, for every time you define a new transaction type or AR receipt method or AB payment, for example, method or whatever, you have to come to this screen and assign your sequence to the new specific transaction type. Because once you enabled the sequence for legal entity or ledger and enabled it for payables and receivables, again it will ask you to generate or the system will enforce the users and will not allow the user to save the transaction or complete it or make it create accounting before he create a sequence for this transaction type. And also I need to mention one thing, that for reporting sequence is gapless and chronological sequence numbering, which is assigned to journals when the GL or general ledger period is closed. This is the reporting sequence. So how to segregate or how to know that this is accounting or reporting sequence? Just from any one of here, you will find Subledger Accounting, and you will find one for period close. Period close, it's just for reporting sequence, which will generate a different sequence during only closing the BGL period in GL. This is the reporting sequence. For any other sequence, and this is also the difference between managing accounting and reporting sequence. That's it. Thanks for watching. Good luck.